about achievement. They called you when they got you to believe it. Thumb and finger held to their foreheads in an L shape. Trapped in a capitalist hellscape. Let's fight back and have some talks about class and the massive cost of the disastrous plots of fascists and Nazis, fat cats and fox. It's 1,000 natural shocks. A Bad with Money podcast.
Hello and welcome to 1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast. I'm your host, Gabe S. Dunn. And with me today, we have KB Brookins. Do you want to tell my audience who you are and what you do?
What's up, KB Brookins, pronouns they and them. I am a author primarily. I write poems, creative nonfiction, and fiction. And I also run a newsletter and digital series called Trans News That Doesn't Suck.
Why did you start that?
You know, it was actually an offhand idea, like not necessarily something that I felt like had a whole lot of attention behind it. It was just like, oh my God, I need to be posting more videos, and I'm very actually video phobic. Like I don't like posting videos. I'd rather I'm a very text-based, creator. So I'd rather like blog and then get offline. But I was like, okay, everyone's making videos and like I probably could stand to try. And I kind of went through a number of ideas of stuff I could post. And then I was like, well, what is something that I would actually consume? Well, all I see on my timeline all the time is like negative news related to trans people because I know my algorithm is trying to upset me. So then I like engage with stuff. So why not post about positive news stories that kind of get buried on the feed in favor of negative stuff? So then I just started doing these videos once a week that were just one positive thing that I could find about trans people across the world. People really gravitated to them. And I was like, well, cool. I maybe can then make this into a newsletter since people like are trying to push me to do it more often. And I'm like, I'm not going to make a video every day, y'all. That's nuts. Instead, I'm just going to make a newsletter, which now I send a weekly newsletter that is just a roundup, like a list of positive trans news. And there's never been a week, I've been doing the newsletter since April 2025. There's never been a week where I can't find at least 10, if not 20 plus positive trans news stories.
Wow. So can we talk a bit about the algorithm feeding negative stuff and what you think that outrage does to us as trans people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that ultimately the goal of all of these social media platforms, whether you're talking about X or Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, all of the other ones, like their goal is to keep you on the app, right? And they have figured out pretty much as a front, like what is our best bet for keeping you on the app is like pissing you off actually. Because when you get pissed off about something, then you're like clicking that story, looking at the comments for it, sharing it with other people, being like, oh my God, can you believe this? Like they know that that drives clicks. Right. So I do think it's like firstly, a prerogative of we want to keep you on this app in hopes that, we can make more money off of you. And then secondly, I do think it is the collusion of politics with social media, right? Like we are in an age, right, where people are getting, what do you call it, subpoenaed, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg stays in court because of like all of the stuff that's going on the Meta apps. And then also you have Elon Musk, who is so heavily involved in the 2024 election, and according to him, right, he's the reason why Donald Trump got elected, and it's no mistake on his part for him to take over X, what he calls X now, what I still call Twitter. There's also the collusion of TikTok with Donald Trump, right, because it was about to get like shut down, and then conveniently around the election, they're like, thanks to Trump, we're not going to shut down in the US. Like it's just
that was wild.
It's like ridiculous, the collusion between social media and like specifically far right politicians and billionaires. So I think that there's something there where they are trying to push their own agenda of like anti-transness, and so therefore is prioritizing the anti-trans content on our feeds and deprioritizing things that like refute their pseudoscientific hateful beliefs, right, and opinions ultimately are what they are. The way that that's trickled down to us trans people is like genuinely stressing us out. And we know that like emotional, mental stress takes a toll on your physical health. And there have been multiple statistics that have come out that says like, trans people are just less well than our cis counterparts physically and mentally. because of the stress of transphobia, not just IRL, but also like the stress of transphobia that we consume online. So it's a really negative, it manifests very negatively, all of these things for trans people. And what I hope to do with Trans News That Doesn't Suck is be at least one thing where like every time you hear from me in a newsletter, you know it's good news. Like it's not something that's gonna stress you out. Everything else in the world is gonna stress you out, but I'm never going to not be sending you good news. For like my videos slash sometimes they're like flip throughs instead that I post once a week, it's again like trying to counteract the badness with some goodness.
I know you mentioned you're just one newsletter. How do you? I grapple with, well, don't placate, because people need to be aware of the scary stuff going on, or need to have the. But then I'm sort of like, what is the right level of fear? Like it's
Yeah.
hard to, like it's hard to. I think sometimes people will only post, "Hey, this is in danger," and then they don't post like when it's suddenly voted out.
Right, right. I think there is no shortage of the bad stuff. Like if people want to stay informed on trans policy and like all of the bad stuff, there are so many accounts doing that, like
Right.
constantly. And there are really great trans journalists that are keeping us aware of the bad stuff. So I'm trying to like instead focus on the good stuff because I feel like there's oversaturation with the bad stuff. And I think that it's very important to stay aware of both of the stuff happening and then also the positive things because they're often linked. We'll hear, oh my God, this law, in insert state, like is so transphobic, blah, blah, blah. And then you conveniently don't hear about how that law like was struck down,
Right.
right? You'll hear like, oh, Texas, which I'm from, right? Born and raised in Texas. Oh, Texas has like 200 anti-trans bills, and then you won't hear how at the end of the legislative session, actually 196 of those bills were killed, you know?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
I'm
mm-hmm.
like, it frustrates me as a person that also like comes from a place that peddles a lot of anti-trans bills. It frustrates me that people don't know about the fierce activism that happens that makes sure that most of those laws don't pass and that constantly is asking people to show up to make sure that those laws don't pass. So I find my newsletter also to be, and the video series also to be like a celebration of the great activism that is happening and to tell people like, okay, you have all of this rage, you have all of this anger. There is actually something that you could do that will like tangibly make sure that we have more good news. And maybe it is me platforming or saying something about this activist group that did actually like make sure that one bill didn't pass. And now
Mm-hmm.
you know about that group. Now you can get involved in that group, and I'm going to encourage you to do so that the good news one day outweighs the bad.
Yeah. I think it also has the effect of making cis people think that there are so many more of us, or that that we
Yeah.
are some sort of crazy problem that needs 200 bills. A lot of times when I get into arguments on the internet, which I shouldn't, but also with I have a Spanish tutor, and he had heard the Amani Khalif story.
Mm-hmm.
She's a boxer, and there was concern, quote unquote, that she was actually a trans woman and it wasn't fair. And then
Mm-hmm.
they tested her, and she is a cis woman. He had
Mm-hmm.
heard about the testing of her, but he had not heard the end of the story.
Right.
I was informing him of that. And there was also, when I argue with people in the comments, a lot of times about sports, one guy, we were arguing about the Olympics, and I was like, a trans woman has never medaled. So you're
Mm-hmm.
arguing with me about a thing that hasn't happened. But in his
Yeah.
mind, it feels like it has happened because there's so much legislation
Mm-hmm.
and stuff happening against it,
Mm-hmm.
that it gives that almost their job is done for them, whether the bill passes or not, by giving the impression that we need so much regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And like there have been even a thing that I've been covering more recently in the newsletters, like there have been so many campaigns that have spent millions of ad dollars on like anti-trans ads, and then turns out that their like constituents actually want to know about affordability, actually want to know about transportation, actually want to know about shit that affects their daily lives. Because
Right.
trans people being these ghouls is not like a real issue. This is an issue that like a lot of people are putting promotional dollars behind to actually distract from like other things. Trans people have been receiving been receiving gender affirming care for a long time. And no one has, died, you know, because a trans person was able to receive care. But people have died from malnutrition. People have died from houselessness. People have died from like all of these other issues that they decidedly don't want to put money and time behind. So I try to like, in the newsletter, of course, I'm just like, blasting people with all of these positive news stories that I can find. But I especially like to provide a sentence or so on like, hey, so like another study has shown that like gender affirming care, right, is like scientifically proven to have all these benefits. Another thing has showed like yet again that all of these anti-trans ads don't work. Like they don't work long term because it's not actually like helping the day-to-day life of anybody.
There's a messaging problem where someone, even on the Democrats' side, will say, "Well, we need to get back to norms or something."
Yeah,
Fuck you, Gavin Newsom. But it's like,
right.
no, what you mean is exactly what you're saying, KB. That this is not a problem that affects most people.
Hmm.
So why is your governor saying we need to make sure that kids are being called their assigned at birth pronouns at school versus hey, that kid doesn't have school lunch?
Right, right.
It is even on the Democrat side. I think there's no real opposition party, but on the
Hmm.
Democrat side, it's also painted as similarly we need to get back to these issues, but let me do a little thing where we absolutely throw trans people under the bus.
Right,
So
right.
it's both. It's a very convenient, like you said, sort of ghouls boogeyman type
Hmm.
situation. I wonder how much it would benefit cis people to be subscribers to your newsletter.
Yeah, I mean, I would love more cis people to be subscribers of the newsletter because though it is a boost of serotonin, it's also educational. Like it's telling you
Right.
about news that you otherwise like would not know about. And it's also like I'm artfully flipping in some suggestions of stuff to do for the paid version of my newsletter. So like I send a Friday newsletter that's free for anybody. And then I have a Wednesday one that includes a section of like recommendations. And they're just like recommendations, steps that people can take to support trans people in their local communities and beyond. So it'll be like,
Cool.
hey, have you heard of this organization? Pride is coming up. Have you decided when you're gonna volunteer for like a local trans-led organization where you live? So on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. It would be great. Because I think that just trans people caring about trans rights is only going to get us so far. We
Mm-hmm.
need allies. Just like any social movement over time, it hasn't been just like that demographic, but it's also been composed of like people who are willing to inconvenience themselves for the greater good. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that since people don't even have to do a whole host of a lot to inconvenience themselves for trans rights, in my opinion, right? Like it can be donating your dollars, donating your time, talking to the people around you. And that is a much less risky endeavor than it is for like me,
Literally.
do something.
Right. I mean, especially talking to the people around you. Even like cis people being like, "Oh, I want to like know things from your newsletter." They don't even understand transness at all, I've found. Even in the
Mm,
I've talked about this a lot. Even in the LGBT community amongst cis people in that community, I
mhm.
find they don't know anything.
Yeah, and I mean that's by design.
Mhm.
Education as it relates to gender is failing people. Education as it relates to sexual health is failing people. Like there are so many counties in the US where like queer inclusive sex ed is still not a thing. You know what I
Right.
mean? And then there was a statistic that came out not too long ago, or maybe some years ago actually at this point, that was like, oh, 70% of people in the US or something like don't know a trans person, or they don't think that they know a
They
trans
don't
person.
think that they do.
Yeah, so I'm like, we're like 1% of the US. So you likely have actually met a trans person. They maybe just haven't felt comfortable enough to tell you that.
Mhm.
Or they've like, been living a stealth lifestyle. You never know. Yeah, the education is not there, though people try to disparage like getting educated online. I'm like, it does have a very important place
Mhm.
in the times where like we can't depend on our educational institutions, especially K-12, to do it. Like we have to do it. We have to be the
Mhm.
ones like putting out information that is not bogus, that is not like, sponsored by Amazon, right? Like we have to be the people saying something to the people and having hard conversations. And I especially think like the best thing that a cis person could do for me truly is like one of those three things: donating your money, donating your time, talking to the people around you. I think a fourth thing also is like getting educated. And the education is so out there, like you have to just look for it. And ideally look for it from folks who actually have lived experience.
There's amazing books. I mean, Kate Bornstein's books, Dean Spade's put out books. Like there's tons of writing. I'm sure even your own writing. There's, tons of books and writing on the subject going back forever when people say,
Hmm.
oh, trans is new. I'm like, just go back. This is a big thing that I've just in all aspects of politics. It's been kind of an
Hmm.
interesting because, especially as a trans person, I think I'm expected to know everything. And I think it's
Right.
been really helpful to say, someone's like, well, what are we supposed to do about, trans women in sports? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. But you know who does?
Hmm.
There are so many people who have,
Hmm.
like, the question, you asking the question to me is fascinating because if you really wanted to know, there are people whose entire academic thesis is about this.
Right.
There are people
Right.
who they have written books. There are people who study this. You can read Harrison Brown's book. You can read, like, there's so much out there, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating that I think people think the extent of their learning is asking one trans person or coming onto someone's account and asking, like, even like with, this is like somewhat related but unrelated. Even people saying to me, "Oh, you want to abolish prisons? Well, where would the criminals go?" You know what, baby? I am new. I there are thanks for asking. There are, I would say, hundreds of books written on this topic.
Yeah, and I mean, even for trans people in sports, like we're gonna do the same thing about that as we've been doing about people who don't have the same hormonal balances. Like that's the case amongst cis women as well. Like
Right.
people act like, oh, trans women. I really hate the rhetoric of like trans women have this like ultimate advantage. There have been so many studies that have debunked that actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are also like things like, oh, I am born with like less estrogen than maybe somebody else. Now are you going to ban me from sports? Like that's the
Right.
case amongst cis women and amongst like cis men as well in sports. Like some people just have more levels of estrogen or more levels of testosterone than other people. It's really not that big of a deal, is how I feel.
It's all to police cis women. It is all to police
Yeah.
cis women. They
Right, right. And
contribute
then
to their
like
own downfall.
And then like the whole thing about like, oh, where would we put the criminals? I'm like, there have been so many books written about, I mean, back to and before like Our Prison's Obsolete by Angela Davis. And I'm like, what are we
Right.
doing about the criminals now? There are still so many criminals actually. Like there are quote unquote criminal, but like there are so many people still committing sex crimes. There are so many people still committing larceny in the White House even.
When people are asking in that way, they don't want the answer, I have found.
Right,
But I
right.
still force it on them. I
Yeah.
still answer. I've just also started, I'll be like, you know what? I hope one day you can open your eyes to a better future that frees yourself from gender
Hmm.
norms. God bless you. Like, I've just started
Right,
being
right.
like, go with God. I don't know. I'm not even like that religious, but I just am like, one day they'll be like, this isn't realistic. And I'm like, you know what, baby? I hope one day you can dream big.
Right.
What are some of the your favorite or some of the best recent good trans news stories that you've enjoyed?
Well, I have my own personal good trans news, which is like my paperback for my memoir came out recently. Yeah, thank
Hey.
you. And it's a memoir about growing up Black and trans in Texas and rethinking healthy masculinity and creating that for myself. I think it's a good book.
What is it called? What is it called?
It's called Pretty. It's a
Great.
memoir that just came out in paperback edition, which is the cheaper option between hardback and paperback. But outside of me, I do think we're living in a bit of a renaissance as it relates to trans literature. So Ben Green has a great book. Definitely check out his book. There's also the book Night Night Fawn by the trans mask author Jordy Rosenberg. It's a novel. And also there is Detransition Baby by Tori
Uh,
Peters, which
mwah, 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 mwah,
she
mwah.
is like she's all the craze, and I think she is a person that lives up to the hype. Because I recently
100.
read, yeah, I recently read Detransition Baby, and I really liked it. And then there's also Max Delson. He is also a trans mask author and has this short story collection called Crawl that I really liked, and it's all like following trans dudes in 2010 Seattle. So
Wow.
there have been a lot of good books that have come out, and that's probably some of my favorite news. And then also a news story that I posted last week on my newsletter is Virginia Commonwealth University. Some folks over there did a study that debunked this right-wing argument that most trans kids, quote unquote, grow out of identifying as trans, because that's such a popular argument online. But they did a study, an actual reputable study, and proved that that was bullshit. So I'm happy about that.
Wow. How did they study it?
I am not a researcher, so me trying to talk about it is gonna be not great.
Yeah. I mean, it's
But
also
yeah.
like, well, they talked to them.
Yeah.
Also
Yeah, it was
sort
a
of
lot
like
of that.
huge,
Yeah.
huge if true. But yeah, they sort of, sat down and talked to them.
Yeah. It's on what is it? Like APA's like psychness, so it's a psychology study.
Very cool.
Some people that are very much better at science than me did it. Shout out to them.
Wow. I mean, so yeah, is it a lot of, are you covering a lot of studies that are coming out and like a lot of
Mm.
debunking type stuff?
I try to do a mix of things. So I do some like pop culture type stuff, so like
Hmm.
books and TV shows, movies. I also do a mix of policy stuff. So like, hey, the Supreme Court decided not to do this, or this law was outlawed in Wisconsin, whatever. Like I do policy related stuff too. And then I feel like the third sector maybe is like more scientific studies. And I do try to focus on scientific studies that are either debunking anti-trans sentiments or like bringing more useful research to trans people and trans lives, because we are such an under-researched demographic due to a number of reasons, right? Like some people live stealth, and then also because there haven't been enough historically researchers interested in trans life. So when new studies kind of come out about like the effects of HRT, the usefulness of using someone's correct pronoun, Teen Vogue actually like published a study about that some years ago. It talked about the positive effects of like using one's correct name and pronoun psychologically. So any of that stuff I try to include as well.
It's interesting, especially I think trans masks are really, really understudied.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's leftover misogyny or what it
Mm-hmm.
is, but I know that we are sort of, in some ways I'm glad that we're left alone,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's hardly any discourse about it unless
Right.
of course there's the whole like this is a plague to our daughters, but less
Mm-hmm.
so, I guess, discourse and books, but less so regulation specifically about trans men.
I would say it's a blessing and a curse. A blessing in the sense that like it's not like that huge over analyzing, over obsession that the right has with trans women, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Then a curse as in like, yeah, there are certain things that we don't know. Even like I just wrote an essay not too long ago about vaginal atrophy and how like that is
Mhm.
primarily studied only in cis women going through menopause or cis women going through like breast cancer treatments, but there is not a lot of research at all about how vaginal atrophy influences trans men and trans masculine people and people on T, even though it's like so common.
I didn't even know about it
Yeah,
till like maybe a year in. I had no idea.
it's incredibly common amongst trans folks on T. So it's like, why is the research not there? It is
Mhm.
a good thing in the sense of going under the radar. It is a bad thing in the sense of there not being enough to turn to, especially in medical fields, but also in like other things.
I didn't know that, and then I was like, "You're telling me there's a if you don't use it, you lose it." It's true.
Literally, yeah.
You're telling me that we made fun of that and that it was true. I can't do everything around here. Deadlines are slipping. I can't just do it all on my own. I need to hire someone. I needed an editor. And I was scrounging. How am I going to find an editor? It was a chaotic mess over here. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. I have personally used Indeed for years. I actually have been hired for 2 jobs off of Indeed. I was able to match my skills with jobs in my area. The only 2 times that I have been hired without any sort of in with the company was through Indeed. So I was pretty stoked to find the people I needed for this podcast, and also to know that I could do that on a place where I have been hired. And if you're looking to hire someone, let's say you're the job looking to hire me, you can use Indeed sponsored jobs as a boost whenever you need to find quality talent. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. That's cuckoo bananas. And so speaking as someone who has been on both sides of the hiring hiring spectrum, Indeed has helped me in real life spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
So you're running out of closet space. The good news? You don't need to stop shopping. You just need to start selling with The RealReal. The RealReal is the world's largest and most trusted resource for authenticated luxury resale. Whether it's that mini bag that can't even fit your phone or those boots you never fully broke in, The RealReal handles everything from photography and copywriting to shipping and pricing. So you can just sit back, get paid, and make room for things that actually feel like you. And with 10,000 plus new arrivals every single day from top designers like Prada, Celine, Louis Vuitton, and Loewe, all for up to 90% off retail, you're bound to find something perfectly on brand to fill that extra closet space with. Plus, this May only, you can get an extra $200 to shop when you sell for the first time. Make room for what feels like you. Go to therealreal.com to start selling and get your extra $200 to keep shopping at therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com. Terms apply.
I think I wouldn't have, if I didn't have trans men around me, I would have no idea, because what also came with it for me was cramping and like terrible sort of like period symptoms. And if I didn't have another trans guy around me to be like, that's what that is, I would have, I was like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
I was like, my ovaries are dead. Like something's wrong. Like and it was, but it wasn't as panic inducing and tragic as I thought it was.
Right.
But if I was just alone, I would have never, and if a doctor wasn't, didn't know about trans men, I would have been fucked.
Yeah, literally there's like a level of trans culture where you have to operate in whisper networks because you can't trust the medical system to actually know about, how to treat trans folks, which is unfortunate. And I think that's a thing that all trans people experience, but especially those on like the trans mass spectrum.
Yeah, there's also a friend of mine would always have issues because he very much passes, and he would go to the doctor and there would be confusion, even though it was in his chart. There would be confusion of like, why are you here? And what is this? And like, what is this for? And even for me, it had nothing to do with anything other than I have fibromyalgia and I have issues with my hands not working. And I went to like a doctor to have her look at my hands for pain management, and my chart was all over the place. It was like trans man, and then some of the stuff she wrote said she, and then some of the stuff was my old name, and then some of the stuff was it was so disorganized that if it wasn't me reading it, I'd be like, who is this about? Are there two of them? I don't understand.
Right.
And it didn't really have anything to do with my problems with my hands. I was like, this is about to confuse the fuck out of my insurance.
The competency with like trans care is really not there. It highly depends on where you live. And then it highly depends on if you live near like an LGBTQ plus center, for example. Like you can't necessarily like bank on them even being like trans competent.
Yeah.
Because some people hear like LGBTQ health and they just think of like HIV and STI testing, which is like not everything. And PrEP and PEP is like, of course, those things are like necessary, manageable, need education about. But like HRT stuff can be tricky. Also, like, the consistency with like getting things covered by insurance, like intersex care is like totally the whole separate thing that people will say, like, people will have the LGBTQIA plus acronym, but actually be only proficient in like cis people, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, probably mostly cis men, I think.
Yeah.
So it is heartening to see that there are more studies happening, and that I think there's a connection. I mean, it's obvious there's a connection between hopefully studies coming out and then the effect on policy, where you have these advocates have something to point to, whether or not the U.S. government believes in science anymore, which they don't, but there is at least something to point to indicate that this isn't true. And then I guess I'm trying to like, I have seen that impact policy in some ways. What do you see mostly with impacting policy? It's just people showing up. Like activists showing up, it's advocates going to the White House or going to city council or
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. It's hard to say like this or that. I think it's like all of those things together. I lived in Texas up until last year. I know that every other year there is a legislative session, and the point of the legislative session was for all of these legislators that are in like the Texas Senate or the Texas House to like try to pass statewide bills. More often than not, they ended up killing bills more than like passing them. But anyway, so you start the ledge, right? And by the end of the deadline where people can submit bills, there was something wild, like 200, right? Like anti-queer and trans bills, most of them being anti-trans.
I can't even think of 200 things that we're doing.
Right, exactly.
But anyway,
A lot of the bills I think were just like, and I think people need to like understand this more. A lot of them are actually just to impress their base. Like it's just stuff that they can put in their newsletter. Like a lot of them, they know it's never gonna pass, but they just want something to be like, hey constituents, I'm working on this. Hey people who hate trans people, here, see what I'm doing. A lot of them won't even get a like committee,
right.
hearing, right? So you have like a large runoff of like, okay, that goes from 200 to 100 in like the span of a month. And then like from a month, that goes from 100 to like 20. And with these bills, there are organizations like Equality Texas, statewide LGBTQA plus organization. And then you have Transgender Education Network of Texas, which is a trans BIPOC run org. They do a lot of good work. So you have orgs like this that will have advocacy days where they go to the offices of different House reps and different senators to be like, hey, here's the human cost of this bill. I really need you to not vote for this, or I really need you to hold this in the committee and make sure that it doesn't get a hearing or make sure it doesn't make it to the floor. So they do a lot of advocacy literally in the whole, I think it's like 5 months of the legislative session, and some of them pull like 12-hour days, like just at the ledge talking to people in their offices. The other leg of that is like advocacy, outside of the immediate staff of that organization, right? Everybody can't work 12 hours. They need help. So then they post on social media and they're like, hey, do you want to come lobby with us? Do you want to do X, Y, and Z? So I've seen them do a lot as far as getting other people involved. I heavily suggest, because every state has some version of like an Equality Texas, right? Like a statewide organization that advocates for queer and trans rights. Like get involved with those organizations, because when they call for you to come to the ledge, it matters significantly for people to actually talk to real people and not just be like on their computers thinking of trans people this way. Like they have to see, for some people, right? They have to see a person in 3D in front of them and be like, okay, this is somebody that I actually represent and that I have to be accountable to in order to, do what it is that they are supposed to do, which is support a healthy constituency. And then there is also the advocacy on the front of the arts. I lived in Austin for 7 years where there were constantly like drag shows and variety shows, comedy, music that were like raising funds for these organizations. So like Equality Texas or Tent like could be a beneficiary of their RuPaul night or whatever. I think the arts had a place in advocacy with like people are dancing, having a good time, but they're also putting their dollars towards something important. Or like at those events, I would see, tablers from those organizations getting people signed up to volunteer, etc. So anyway, I say all of that to say I think it's a mix of things, right? I think it's the people who do the policy making, right? I think it's the people who advocate for that policy to change or become better. There is the artists, there are the volunteers for those organizations. Like it has to be everything kind of happening at the same time in order to create the change we need to see.
Absolutely. I get down. I think people are nervous and sad and scared and defeatist, and it deprives you of community, and it also deprives you of seeing any wins, even just looking at your newsletter, but wins in your own, as you were saying, like your own city.
Right.
Because I see so many people say, well, what could I do? What could a little old me do? And they don't realize that you join a group, you be part of a group. I think a big problem, especially with I do a lot of anti-ICE advocacy, and I think one of the big things is people say, well, what can I do? Or what if I can't start something? And I guarantee if you have an idea, somebody's doing it or somebody has started it. You can join anything. If you look, you can join something that's already happening, or you can get involved in a group that you don't have to be responsible for every single aspect of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of the mutual aid stuff I do. Some I don't cook that well. Some people could cook, and I'll bring juice, and that's my abilities.
Right.
I think it's been helpful to keep out of depression by
Mm-hmm.
helping on that level, and also going to Sacramento and yelling at people.
Mm-hmm.
That's our capital in California.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anyone who's seen the videos on my Instagram, they don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
But the next step that I think, right, so going there and saying, oh, they don't really care,
Mm-hmm.
almost is secondary to getting the footage of that and posting
Mm-hmm.
it, because that going viral causes other people to care. So
Mm-hmm.
even when you think this isn't going to do anything, it can do something.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much behind the scenes that I don't think people realize. I think people take a lot of stuff at face value. So the person who's speaking, they might be really good at speaking and really good at being the face, and someone else
Mm-hmm.
wrote the speech,
Mm-hmm.
or someone else is videoing it, or someone else is editing it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think there's an idea that everything is happening as you're seeing it, and not
Mm-hmm.
with any sort of strategy or backing behind it, and which has
Mm-hmm.
been frustrating to me. And when you do know that, I think it does give you more hope.
Right.
And they say, "Oh, you're
Absolutely.
doing all of this by yourself," and most people aren't.
Yeah, it's like too much. Like put the burden of dismantling transphobia on like one person. It has to be like all of these different sectors like colluding together. The policymakers, the artists, the activists, the scientific, right? Like researchers. There's been no movement that has been successful that hasn't been like multiple people working in accord. And I think in like queer circles, I try to say we even already like have an example of a movement that was successful, and that's ACT UP. Like,
Mm-hmm.
look at what they did, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was not just one person. It was a whole bunch of people working over like years of time. So like often these things will need to be parsed out over time, like these networks need to be developed. And it was also a lot of people who had competing ideas. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yes.
if you read, because people are all like, oh my God, it was so much infighting. I'm like, you don't think it was infighting in the 80s?
Of course.
Like that happened then as well. And like the ways that people went about it was like this group do this,
Mm-hmm.
this group do this,
Mm-hmm.
this group do this. If you don't want to do this, go do this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be lots of people. And it has to be people like working within the things that they are passionate about and that they can do well, at least. I try to say, because often, you know, someone will comment every now and then, like, oh, why is this important, right? Like, why is it important to like celebrate the good news? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if you are only ingesting bad news all of the time, you will burn out. You will feel like there's nothing to do. Oh my God, everything is over, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to like balance the good and the bad because that is how we survive as people. I am but one place, right? I am but one newsletter, and my newsletter MO is good news. It's in the name, trans news that doesn't suck. If you want to go see the bad news, I even have newsletters that I've suggested, right? Like after you subscribe to my newsletter, where you can go find that. Make sure that you have that balance in your life. Otherwise, you're going to be fucking pissed off all the time, and that's going to lead you to apathy.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about diversity of tactics, and comrades are not necessarily friends, in that you're working together. You don't have to agree about every single thing. A lot of times with protests, I see people policing each other at protests, and I often say, you don't get to tell them what to do. Like, you don't get to, if that person wants to stand in front of the Iceman and you think that that's going to cause problems, walk away. Go do something else. You don't have to. If you think people focusing on trans people in sports is going to cause issues for other trans people, walk away. Do something else. Like, I think there's the infighting is about perfection, and also there's an infighting along like, well, this is what this is going to do is going to cause this and going to cause that. And that's great. As you said, go do another thing. I think it's also wild to come after the one thing that's like, let me just put out the positive stuff, and then that's my thing, and then other people can have their thing.
Right.
And I think people are often expecting perfection from everybody and
Hmm.
expecting everybody to do everything. Just like one person isn't going to fix everything, one person isn't going to break everything. And also, your idea could also be bad. Have you considered that?
Right. Right. I don't know. Unless someone is genuinely like being harmful, I
Hmm.
think them having a different thing that they do that is separate than what you do is like not the end of the world. And being able to differentiate between like what is actually harmful and what is something that I just like don't want to do or that I like for whatever reason don't find valuable. And like you not finding it
Hmm.
valuable doesn't mean that it's not valuable to somebody else.
Right.
So,
Yeah. When I try to do explanations of things, people say, "Oh, well, you didn't realize this before." No, I did realize it.
yeah.
But you know who hasn't? Other people. You know who might not know good news? Other people.
Yeah.
Who might not know what fighting for our rights actually accomplishes? Other people, my dude.
Hmm. You can have your thing, other people can have their things. I believe in like the importance of it all. Hence why it's not all like policy. It's not
Hmm.
all studies. It's not, I don't just do media. Like I think a mix of things is good. That also allows people to like find themselves or find what gives them joy, like somewhere in the newsletter, right? Like some people will be really excited to check out a new trans artist and listen to their music. Some people will be more excited about like, oh my God, the city that I live in had a pro-trans ordinance that passed. And some people
Hmm.
might be more interested because maybe it's more relevant to their workplace to have like study. You know, like I
Right.
think it's important to like let it all in, be okay with the complexity. And also, like as an artist myself, I find that I like to find the like overlaps between like what I do, right, which is right, and then also like what other kind of sectors do in order to like ultimately move towards the same goal, which is we want to see a better world. We
Hmm.
want to see a world where trans people get to live happy, fulfilled, long lives. The way I go about it may be different than someone else's, but ultimately we're right next to each other, and we should be because we have the same ultimate goal.
To close out, I wanted to ask about your work in particular. You talk about like literature and writing and poetry and stuff like that. How do you see your place in that in terms of whatever that means to you with regard to transness and good trans news?
My creative writing is ultimately trying to do a couple of things. Number one, provide representation for people like me. So, a lot of my reasoning for writing the literature that I do is because I couldn't find books like it, like on the shelves when I was young or when I was in earlier parts of my transition. I was really looking for a book that really mirrored my experience to me, and I've gotten things that are close but not quite. I was into Black studies, right? And I studied Black studies in undergrad. And when I was trying to kind of deconstruct my relationship to masculinity, I looked to like Black masculinity studies. All of the things that I found were from like a cis perspective, which is
Hmm.
different. Your experience of masculinity is different when it was like expected of you to be a man from birth versus
Right.
not. And then also like when I went over to like queer and trans studies to try to get like Black, specifically trans masculine perspectives, it was a real lacking, like in
Hmm.
LGBTQIA plus studies, and then also in queer and trans lit. To this day, I still like see lists queer and trans books to read this summer, and it's like no Black people.
Yeah.
And it's like that's a problem. Or it's like no Black people plus like Janet Mock. You know, like they choose one person. Sometimes they choose one person and they're like, that's it. Every queer Black or every queer person you've ever heard of plus James Baldwin. And I'm like, I don't like that. So like
Yeah.
I'm going to write the stuff that moves me about, you know, the experiences that I have. And I've been lucky to like meet other people throughout my lifetime that get it. Other Black trans mass people, queer people that grew up in the South, so on and so forth. But I'm like, why don't we have literature for us? Why don't we deserve to look at something and be like, that's so me? Because so many, you know, people that I've met throughout time can look to other writers and people on TV and people in movies and be like, that's so me. Like all the fucking basic white girls were like, Mean Girls is my shit, right? Like when I was growing up, it does something to your psyche when you don't see yourself in the media that you consume. I try to write things that are aggressively from my perspective, just like Ernest Hemingway did that, Shakespeare did
Hmm.
that, so on and so forth. Hopes that that brings people right to the page that have my experiences, and for people that don't have my experiences, they bring empathy an understanding heart, a willingness to like educate themselves. There's been so much literature that I have had to read over time that has not been from my perspective, but it still has filled my cup, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to find something in that, understand better an experience that's not mine. So I want people who don't have my experiences to also come to the page. And then also ultimately for both of those demographics, right? People who are like me and people who aren't. I just want them to like be moved by something that I've written. To be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm pissed off, or oh, I'm really happy, or oh man, I shed a tear there. If I
Yeah.
can like elicit even any reaction, I think that is a good thing too.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. That's a lovely positive ending. Do you want to tell my audience where they can find you?
Yep. So I am Earth2KB, EARTHTOKB on all of the social media. So TikTok, what is it, Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
Threads, all of that. Also, my newsletter is transnews.substack.com. It is free
Wow.
99. Yeah.
You got that username. Hell yeah.
Yep.
Damn.
Turns out nobody was using it until 2025. So
That is rough for us. Wow. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to 1,000 Natural Shocks, a Bad with Money podcast. This is a noted bisexual production, edited by Allie Mims. Logo art by Dakota Becker. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to the Substack, 1000naturalshocks.substack.com. The Substack has episodes of this show ad-free and also videos and also my original writing. It would mean so much to me if you would subscribe, even as a free subscriber, but a paid subscriber really allows me to keep doing this work, and I can't do it without you guys. Thank you so much. Okay, love you. Bye.